What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm Jon Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on, everybody? Week 1 of the National Football League is here. It's pretty crazy how fast this year went. I remember being at the Combine. Remember doing the draft show with Colin. I remember being on vacation in Lake Tahoe for the month of July, just thinking like, I miss football. And then football comes back and you're forced to watch the preseason. And I probably watched way too much preseason, but you're like, this isn't quite it. And then you get the cut down and then you get here. And college football gives you a little teaser week 1. You just feel like football's back. And now it's in the air. And the Chiefs, Ravens, we'll probably dive into that on Thursday. Some thoughts, just not necessarily on the game, but just big picture what it means for both teams. Obviously, the Chiefs trying to be the first team to ever three-peat. A lot of pressure on the Ravens. Like, it's now or never. And it probably was now or never last year. But we'll dive into some more of that Thursday. Today, the Niners had a pretty good day. Trent Williams showed up at the crack of dawn. He got a new contract. Brandon Ayuk talked today. Admitted, might have been on me a little bit. And Ricky Pearsall is not just alive, he's in the weight room and his spirits are high. I noticed something watching. I was putting together a shelf yesterday in the living room and watching the Florida State game, and something kind of hit me. I've been talking about this theme, but it's more evident now than it's ever been. And then we'll hit on a couple other little NFL things. Jon Gruden, that is, has a YouTube channel. Brian Daboll's calling plays, and Cam Heyward got a new contract. And then we'll do a mailbag a little bit later today as well. But if you want to go to one of these football games, I always get so amped up when I see the videos of college football teams doing singing, whether it's singing Tom Petty, whether it's Alabama, Dixieland Delight, and it's just so cool. And if you want to go to one of these college football games, there's really no atmosphere like it. The NFL is so unique because the tailgating and going with your community, right? If you're a Bengals fan, an Eagles fan, a Giants fan, or whoever, it's a fun event. And if you want to go to one of these games, I got you covered with the official ticketing app of this podcast. They also do concerts, comedy shows. Listen, you're going to want to go to a football game this fall and do it on us, because take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN, John, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. I remember Colin said something years ago. He has a couple sayings that have stuck with me, and I can't even remember what I did 3 weeks ago. But this saying is something, if you like business, if you work in the business world, that I think is something that you should keep in your back pocket, because it's very true. For most of us, especially younger people, you don't have much leverage. When I first got hired at Fresno State, with Philadelphia, even in radio, like, hey, here's 50 grand, here's 70 grand. Like, you weren't negotiating. No, I want triple. It's like they kind of got you. And the older you get, the more successful you are in any industry, you get a little more power. And his comment was simply, you don't often have leverage. When you get it, use it. And then if you become a behemoth like what Apple is now, you can charge Google $10 billion to use Google Chrome on the iPhone, because that is on the homepage when you search. It's Google Chrome. Well, how do you think that gets there? Google pays a lot of money. Apple takes a lot of shit for how they operate in their app store. Well, guess what? Most businesses, you got to be in the app store. Why? Because the amount of money that flows through there from a business standpoint. And a lot of companies, and I'm sure many people listening to this, like, you're kind of dependent on a couple people, right? I know a lot of businesses are dependent on their distribution channels, are dependent on maybe a certain contact or two. I've had these situations in the podcast world when I had the right contact for a certain company and they advertised and that changed, and then the advertiser went away. And things can change really, really quickly in basically any industry, right? I don't care who's on top for how long, you never know. Rome fell. Apple can fall. The Patriots can fall. It happens. It's life. Things go in cycles. And as a player, as an individual player, you know you can only play for so long. What Tom Brady did is an all-time outlier situation. So every contract holdout negotiation to me is not the same. It's like scouting a player. Every player is their own entity. Some holdouts, I'm like, yeah, makes sense. Some are like, what are you doing? I.e. Le'Veon Bell. I remember when that was happening, so many people in the media were like, he's standing on business. He's doing what he thinks right. And even him, like 6-7 years later, called it a massive mistake. Of course it was. He gave up $15 million. You're literally $15 million richer, whatever after taxes, 8 or 9, than you would have been currently. Like that happened. What Haason Reddick is doing right now, assuming, let's just say he never plays a snap for the Jets, he will be $14 million poorer. Like that's a fact. It's not debatable. It's black and white. And Brandon Ayuk is like, they're offering you this contract, man. It's pretty damn good. You should probably take it. And then there's Trent Williams. You go, well, I'm an 11-time Pro Bowler. I'm widely considered the best left tackle in the league and a future Hall of Famer. And I like Kyle, and I like playing for the 49ers. It's been incredible for my career. It's the first time I get to consistently win. But this is a business. And I've seen enough guys, including some of my great peers. Tom Brady was told by Bill Belichick, essentially, we don't want you. I'm shorting you as a player. And even Tom Brady, if you look back, didn't have that many options. The 49ers went with Jimmy Garoppolo. They had the conversation. Sticking with Jimmy. Titans, sticking with Ryan Tannehill. The Raiders, sticking with Derek Carr. That happened. Peyton Manning was cut. We have seen countless other players. Darrelle Revis, some of the best players of the last decade, cut or forced out. Luke Kuechly. He had a chance to become one of the great linebackers of all time. And then he started getting concussions, and they wouldn't stop. And he had to retire really young. No sport do things change on a dime like they do in the NFL. Trent Williams literally got sick years ago with cancer, and the doctors looked at him and said, you might not make it. So he knows just from a human element how short life could be, potentially. And from a football standpoint, he's played long enough to see his peers at the highest level get thrown in the trash. So when he said today, this was about security, it's a volatile league, he's 100% right. Now, the only time you can make a play like this as a player, when you got 3 years left and $80 million, even if it's not guaranteed, when you have 100% of the leverage. Because that's what he had. The 49ers need him. They don't have a replacement, and no one does when you have a player like that. But the 49ers specifically, their offensive line's kind of not great. And he's not just their best offensive lineman. He's the best, arguably, offensive lineman in the league and one of the best players in the league. So he had the opportunity to bend him over a barrel. Now, he probably wanted even more than he got, but they got to a number that he felt comfortable was worth flying back and getting ready for this game. And I also think this is a combination of he knew he was going to win this negotiation when it started. Why? Because he had all the leverage. And 2, at his age, I don't really want to spend the month of August in Santa Clara. And I don't totally blame him. And there is a small percentage of players in this league that could pull that off. There's literally not a quarterback who could pull it off. It'd be like Patrick Mahomes could. Yeah, but you can't operate in training camp without your starting quarterback. You need that guy around. Pass rushers, we saw Michael Strahan do it back in the day as he got older. It's like, I don't want to be at training camp. And you don't like making exceptions for individuals, but sometimes like Trent Williams, now granted they did fine him, I think over $4 million, but the way they did the deal, he essentially got it right back. So I just think Trent Williams is a good example of a player who's seen so many guys that if he would have just shown up on the contract, which was still pretty lucrative, right? And the 49ers don't plan on cutting him. But what if he got injured? Or what if his play dipped? They get rid of him. And they wouldn't even hesitate. Because that's the way the NFL works. It's what we like about the NFL. Unlike baseball, you sign one of these terrible contracts, you're just stuck with the guy. In basketball, how many contracts throughout the league, if you gave the GM of that team, You can press a button and this contract immediately evaporates and this guy is a free agent. Can you imagine how many NBA teams would press that button? Everyone's like, the NBA is giving away all this money. Most of it is to players. You're like, you can't. You're doing what? But you're stuck because it's all guaranteed. Football's the opposite. It's why so many teams can get good fast because you're never stuck very long. And Trent played his card and he won. And ultimately, the 49ers win because as long as he's still good, you're in great shape. You can't overpay Trent Williams if he just maintains his Pro Bowl level of play at left tackle, protecting Brock Purdy so he can throw to Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, and Brandon Ayuk. It's why I've said this whole time, all this reaction, Colin mentioned this yesterday, the 49ers are in shambles. Well, Brandon Ayuk was never going to be on the Pittsburgh Steelers because they had nothing to offer. Trent Williams was never going to retire because the 49ers were always going to pay him. Now, what date that happened, we didn't know, but it was kind of inevitable. And now they got these two guys. They already have a great defense. They have a fantastic coach. And they have a very, very productive young quarterback who's played at a Pro Bowl level last year. So I would imagine they're still going to be really good. What about Seattle? You mean a guy that's never been a head coach with Geno Smith as his quarterback? Yeah, I'm going to take the 49ers on that one. So what about the Bears over Matt Eberflus? Got good hair, good looking beard. I like Caleb Williams' future, but let's pump the brakes a little bit there. So I think everyone's trying to anoint these. What about Raheem Morris and Kirk Cousins? Say that again out loud. 49ers are going to be okay. Are they going to win the Super Bowl? I don't know. They got 8 guys making over 15 million. So from a cap standpoint, better now than never, but they're going to be really damn good. And they're going to be right in the mix as they've been for the last 3 or 4 years, unless they have a couple catastrophic injuries like any team that you can't overcome. I'll give Brandon Ayuk credit on this. He said today, I made this more difficult than it had to be. Because he did. Now, I appreciate guys that can acknowledge, I played a role in this. Because it'd be easier for him to be like, I'm not talking about, that's what coaches always do. The conversation was between me and him. I'm going to keep that private. We're going to keep that in the family. Any of you that grew up in old school homes know, this does not leave the house. Now everyone's on social media posting their entire life. Back us kids that were growing up in the 80s and the 90s, it was like, this does not leave these doors. That's how coaches and executives talk. I'm going to keep the contract talk between me and his agent and me and the player private. And Brandon Ayuk's like, yeah, I made this more difficult than it had to be. But I mentioned this last week. Is this going to be a guy that was bitter and angry? And he wasn't. He seems very, very happy. And ultimately, the 49ers add Trent Williams. They add Brandon Ayuk. Christian McCaffrey's back at practice. I've heard nonstop. I've heard Bill Simmons say this. I've heard a lot of people. What Christian McCaffrey, what's his situation this year? He said 3 weeks ago, if there was a game on Sunday, he would have played. I've been going to these practices long enough, and a lot of teams do this. They don't ask that much out of their star players. Why? Because their star players, Christian McCaffrey works out 365 days a year. So does Nick Bosa. Trent Williams at training camp the last couple of years that I've been going, I wouldn't exactly call his regimen the Bear Bryant Junction Boys, the double days of Bobby Bowden's Florida State teams in the early 90s. It's not what it looked like. There was a lot of just kind of kicking it on the sideline. Why? Because he's ready to roll. And he's also old. Now, Brandon Ayuk, his rapport with Purdy, they have a good one over the last couple of years. But, he's missed the last 40-plus days where Sauce Gardner and all the Jets guys, they've been training. So they're just in the mix of football. He's been doing the mental stuff because he's been there. But I think there is a question mark how he's going to look on Monday night. And the way our society works, including myself, I'm guilty of this, to react to the games, that if he looks bad, people are going to be critical. Now, over the course of the year, if he plays well, it'll all subside and quiet down. But I would say there's a lot of pressure on him on Monday night to look good, to look really good. And there's pressure on this game because pressure on the 49ers. There's a ton of pressure on the Jets. But can you imagine if you just compared the reps between Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers and Brock Purdy and Brandon Ayuk, it's not even close. Why? Because Brock Purdy and Brandon Ayuk have practiced and played in games for the last year and a half. Those two guys have never played in a real game together beside 4 plays. So it's why the Jets, and I get everyone because it was fun, and I did it last year. I picked them to win the division. There are way too many unknowns for me to just feel comfortable about that squad, right? I just think the coaching situation, just the age and the health of the situation. I'm not saying they can't win on Monday night, but just the long term view of the team. It is a week by week operation, given the kind of health status of some of their guys. The other thing that, and I've talked about this for a long time, is when you're a scout coming up or an assistant coach, there is no handbook. It's like this in most jobs. Were you ready to be the head coach? Were you ready for this position? Hell, it could be, were you ready to become a coordinator the first time? Were you ready to become the director of college scouting? Is anyone truly ready? Like, obviously, you have experience doing something specifically, and hopefully you can grow into the role. And depending on the job, the industry, you might have to produce immediately or you might get a little bit of a runway. But as an assistant coach or as an assistant GM or college director, you don't have to deal with the major problems. When someone that gets drafted in the second round gets a DUI, if you're the college director, like, people aren't talking about you on podcasts, on the radio, on local TV, in the athletic. They're talking about the GM. When the second rounder from the Browns got arrested during training camp, even if his biggest supporter was the defensive coordinator or the second in command of the scouting department, it's on Stefanski and it's on Andrew Berry. No different when someone gets in an accident or something happens. It's on that guy. When you're an assistant coach or an assistant, you don't have to deal with that. So when Ricky Pearsall gets shot, and thank God he's alive, as his mother said, by the grace of God, because when you just say the words, he got shot in the chest in an attempted robbery, if you didn't know anything else, like, he probably died. First, you think probably got hit in the heart. He's dead. You didn't even know who the person was, whether it's a famous person or not famous person. Like, usually when someone gets shot in the chest, you die. And there was a video that went viral of the police officer that showed up, and she was kind of almost in tears. That when she got there and she started holding the wound, he kind of started freaking out just in terms of breathing hard and like just kind of getting worked up, looking at all the blood, and looked her in the eye and said, "Am I going to die?" And she got pretty emotional recounting this. Like, it was a really powerful thing that happened. One, just the incident is fucking insanity. San Francisco and Union Square, which used to be one of, I have spent so much time in San Francisco as a kid. I lived in the city for 2 years. I lived in the Bay Area for 10, a couple years in Emeryville, which is right across the Bay Bridge, another, I would say, 6 in Walnut Creek, which is about 25 miles away, and depending on traffic, anywhere from 25 to 45 minutes. How many days as just a single guy hanging out, partying. It was such a vibrant place when I moved back from Philly. What it has become, and Union Square specifically, used to be, I would say, the most popular, definitely the most famous shopping area in Northern California. It's become robbery central. Now, a lot of these robberies don't involve a gun, because California and San Francisco specifically, like, murder rates. I mean, we're not talking about like some of these areas in Chicago, but it's, no place has more robberies right now. I read an article that you are 50% more likely to have a crime committed, robbery, some sort of violent, interaction in San Francisco than Compton, California. San Francisco, what has happened to it, honestly makes me sick. It's an embarrassment. And for Ricky Pearsall to escape losing his life over fucking getting robbed by a Rolex, one, it's not, I mean, it's shocking when he gets shot, but like that someone tries to rob him is not shocking at all. And that's the sad part, because no one gets in trouble. There aren't any rules anymore in San Francisco. I mean, one of the reasons I'm sitting here a couple years later is because it just, Northern California in general just kind of became like a lawless place. You're like, I'm spending all this money, I'm getting taxed up the wazoo. How does this make sense? And for me, it no longer did. And there were other variables. Obviously, she played a huge role in it, but that was something that really bothered me. And I remember going out to dinner in San Francisco, taking a scouting buddy who was in for a trip to go to a Niner game. And we were walking to this cool restaurant on the water. And where you walk on Market Street, which isn't very far away from where it happened to Ricky Pearsall, I mean, it kind of turns into zombie land. I mean, you got people taking enormous poops on the sideline or on the side of the street. I mean, it's crazy. Like you read this, you hear this. The media loves pushing back. It's not true. It is true. Like as someone who spent a lot of time there, and it gets worse, and that's what's crazy. And for the Niners, my first reaction, if I was Kyle, and it's hard because like these are pros, like I don't know if we should be going to San Francisco, and definitely no autographs, none of that stuff there. It's just not worth the risk. And I would imagine after this that will not take place in the near future. But John Lynch is in the hospital on Saturday night to make sure his first round pick lives. So the 49ers, what a crazy roller coaster of the last, 5, 6 days. NFL Week 1 is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Fans have spoken. We want touchdowns. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly, plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. It's code JOHN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. And get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Something that really jumped out to me with college football is that most of my life, the top programs didn't need to have the best quarterback. Like you could compete to win national championships. You could win 11, 12 games every single year and have a guy that was never going to play in the NFL, that never had a shot to play in the NFL. And when fans watched him, you'd be like, yeah, that's not an NFL player. But it didn't matter because you could load up your roster. And that guy just basically was truly, this comment gets thrown out a lot in the NFL. It is a lot harder to be a quote unquote game manager in the NFL because you do have to make a lot of plays. You play in close games, even if you're a good team, a lot. In college football, for a large portion of my life, the top teams, they played in 2 or 3 tight games. They would destroy 75% of their opponents. I mean, fucking railroad them. Well, with the transfer portal, most teams aren't going to have a second string redshirt sophomore that goes, I'm an NFL player, sit there for 3 or 4 years at linebacker, at safety, at wide receiver. So you're not going 3 deep. Like, let's even go to the Urban Meyer, Nick Saban era, back in the late 2000s and early 2010s of just NFL players because those guys leave. But to me, the thing that has completely changed, and I'm going to use Nebraska as an example. You could have a really good team and an average quarterback and still be really competitive. Those days are over. It has a lot of parallels now to the NFL. If you have bad quarterback play, you're going to lose. Where back in the day, like Georgia might have a team or Bama has a team, like, is this quarterback even good? And then they go 11-2, right? Those days are done. If you don't have a good quarterback, you're going to lose. Florida State. If we took Florida State and Boston College, it's cool to see Bill O'Brien. Anytime you're kind of chubby and bald and you get put in a humid, hot situation, you are going to sweat. And he was sweating profusely. I'm a sweater. If you would put me in that situation, I would have been soaked. He's absolutely soaked. As they are just working Florida State. And I might have jinxed him because I had my guy Derek Ray on, the general manager of Florida State, this offseason. They had just gone 13-1, had one of the best seasons in a long time at Florida State. Now they're 0-2 and looking like a disaster. But their problem isn't the roster. I watched Louis Riddick with Scott Van Pelt last night. He was like, when you walk out to practice or you walk out to warmups, their defensive line looks every bit as good physically as any NFL team. They're huge. If you said Bill O'Brien, you can draft 25 players, not quarterbacks, but just every other position but quarterback. Your roster, Florida State's roster. Do you think Boston College has one guy Bill O'Brien picks? Probably not. But DJ Ungule is so terrible at quarterback, you have no shot. Last year, Nebraska went 5-7, and their quarterback play could not have been worse. I looked today, 5-7. They lost 3 games, 10-13. 3 games, 10-13. They lost another game, 17-20, and they lost a game to Wisconsin, 17-24. If you put the quarterback they have right now, and he's still a lot to learn about Dominic Raiola, but it's pretty clear he's in a different universe than what they had last year. I don't know if they win all 5 of those games because he's a freshman. He might have to. Are they a 9-3 team? They ain't 5-7. And you watch Boston College with Bill O'Brien, he has a quarterback that looks like the poor man's version of Kyler Murray, running around, making plays. If you flip-flop the 2 quarterbacks, like, that's the game. And the sport was never really about that because for so long, the top 10 programs were so much better than everyone else. Like, truly, does anyone believe Clemson's roster sucks? I'm not rivals.com here, but I follow recruiting closely enough after signing days. They are typically in the top 5 or top 10 of recruiting classes. So they are recruiting the best high school players. And for the history of time, that always mattered. Their quarterback play is atrocious. DJ was bad. This Klubnik guy is not good either. And you just lose. What did Saban realize after that first iteration of his era? Like, I can't win with Coker and Sims. So what did he start doing? He started getting NFL quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, Mac Jones, Bryce Young. What happened? They kept kicking ass. They weren't as good on defense as they once were, but they were dominant on offense. LSU, 2019. What happened? Joe Burrow showed up. That's modern day football. We aren't going to see these teams like when I was a kid or even into high school and college, some of the late 90s Miami defenses, Florida State defenses, Ohio State defenses. You could have a good defense, but you're never going to be as deep because guys aren't going to stay. So if you get the quarterback wrong, like in the NFL, you're fucked. I mean, it's really that simple. And college football has mirrored the NFL now. It's such a quarterback-dependent sport because of the rules, because of how difficult it is to play defense. I stand by saying this. Nothing angers me more in college football. No one in 2024 is trying to hurt anybody. Nobody. They have been coached now for years. If you're in college football, when they start changing around the hitting rules, you are like in peewee football, JV football. They have been coaching you for a long time. Not lead with your head. No, cracking guys across the middle. No one's trying to break people's arms and clavicles anymore. That used to happen a lot. Those days are over. And when a guy goes in full speed and his helmet hits the other team's helmet, if you want to throw a flag, targeting rule, whatever. To me, it's football, but I get it. The world's changed. To throw the kid out of a game is beyond egregious to me. No one is trying to injure anybody. That is the most penal penalty. The majority of people in college football, whether you're at Alabama or whether you're at Fresno State or Boise State, are not going to play in the NFL. They're never going to be on the Packers, the Cowboys, the Niners, the Eagles. They're not. Their career is going to end after college. End after college. To take away this guy from a football game, to me, is borderline un-American. I mean, it really bothers me. And I try to contain it, but it happened a couple times this weekend. And I went, can somebody change this rule? Can we remove that part of it? Maybe it was necessary early on. It's not necessary. It happened in the USC LSU game. He wasn't trying to do that. No one is. I get it. It happens. They're kids. To throw a player out of that game, you don't. This isn't baseball. You don't play every day. You get 12 of these a year, and 6 or 7 of them really matter. And that was one of them. And when that happens, it really pisses me off. A couple other NFL stories. It's great. Forever, if a guy left TV and they got fired in coaching, he would just disappear. You wouldn't see him. And now, like a guy like Jon Gruden, he's kind of toxic because of the way it ended there, and he's suing the NFL, and ESPN can't really get back into bed with him because they're trying to be in good graces with the NFL and they want the Super Bowl. And I get it. You just would never hear from Jon Gruden again. The only time you ever hear from him is when you see him in pictures like, oh, Andy Reid invited him to practice, right? Kalen DuBois had him speak to the team. Like, I don't even know if that happened, but you know what I mean? We started a YouTube channel. It's just him just talking ball and just kind of doing his Monday night TV shtick. So one thing cool about YouTube is it's an incredible platform. If you just want to start, you just start loading videos. Pretty easy. And he's doing it. Now, I watched a little bit of his Eagles-Packers one. Felt like he was playing up. I think the one thing YouTube will expose, like being on Monday Night Football, you could kind of play this caricature, which I think is part of him. It felt like, John, just be yourself. Like, this isn't all you. Some of it's you, but not all of this is you. Authenticity really shines through in the modern day landscape. It's what I consume, definitely, as someone that watches a lot of these videos of just a bunch of different people. And just my advice to you, as someone that consumes hours of YouTube a day, just try to be a little more like you would be talking with your brother or talking with Andy. It's the Monday night shticky thing. You can add elements of that, but it's not needed. People are coming from you. You're really famous. You obviously been around football a long time. You know what you're talking about. Just act normal. Robert Saleh said today, because the Niners and the Jets, because of the long weekend, had a practice today, then they're off tomorrow and they're back Thursday. Asked about Haason Reddick, if he was in the building and if he was practicing, and he said 0 status change. So his holdout continues. I don't quite understand the long-term play here. We kind of jumped the shark. Early on, I get it, but like, what are we doing now? You're going to hold out for the season? You're going to hold out. The Jets aren't going to pay you. Are you hoping that eventually they just crack because they traded a third-round pick for you? It doesn't feel like they're going to do that. Don't you almost make $1 million a game? My recommendation would be play. Like that's a lot of money. Cam Heyward signed for a lot of money. A little like the Trent Williams thing, divided by 2. Stalwart for the organization, team captain, man of the year, good player. In a perfect world, he retires a Steeler, and they take care of him. And last but not least, this has been reported on for a while. The Daboll going back to OTAs and in training camp was the play caller he had taken away from Mike Kafka. He confirmed that today. I guess if you wanted to look at it from a point that if the offense sucks this year, it was easy to it was Kafka's fault, Daniel Jones' fault. Well, now you are playing a role in that. When you're the CEO guy, it's like, I'm giving big picture philosophical beliefs. Well, now on 3rd and 7, if you run a route that looks terrible, you're part of the criticism with Daniel Jones. So maybe the Maras said, we want you to call plays. I think there's a chance that happened. Because if I was John Mara, I'd be like, we did hire you from the Buffalo Bills because of how awesome you were with Josh Allen. Shouldn't you maybe call the plays? Especially when we look around the league and McVay, LaFleur, Kyle, Kevin O'Connell, all these guys, are calling the plays that are offensive guys. And I do wonder, they'll never admit it, if there was some internal pressure there with the powers that be that said, Brian, we want you with the offensive play sheet for 17 weeks a year now.